Once there was a kingdom, a bizarre and irrational kingdom ruled over by a terrifying and evil being. This was Britain in the 1980s. But in this decade, Terry Pratchett began writing about a far more entertaining world.
In a second-hand set of dimensions. In an astral plane that was never meant to fly.
The Discworld. Starting with The Colour of Magic, he set about parodying every fantasy cliché around. But pretty soon, the series became a complex imaginative world full of very human, non-human characters, while always remaining extremely funny. There haven't been too many games based on Discworld so far, but I'm going to take a look at the 5 games that have been released to date. Welcome to the Disc, World and Mirror of Worlds. When it comes to computer games, the main Discworld series comprised 3 point-and-click adventures in the 1990s. But many years before these, in 1986, the first game based on a Terry Pratchett book was released. The Colour of Magic text adventure was available for the Commodore 64, Amstrad CPC, and the ubiquitous ZX Spectrum. At the time, Pratchett was only just releasing his second Discworld novel, so the idea of it becoming a 41-book series probably hadn't occurred to anyone at the time, so this is an adaptation of a novel rather than a series. It was written by Fergus MacNeil, who had previously written a Tolkien spoof game called Board of the Rings, and would later go on to make the similarly parodic Kingdom O' Magic point-and-click adventure, and weirdly, he would also voice the announcer in the intro to Carmageddon.
20 seconds to go. Those who are about to die, we salute you.
The Colour of Magic is a fairly average text adventure for the time, with a limited parser and none of the improvements made to the genre by the likes of Infocom. It's also a pretty direct adaptation of the novel, being split across 4 tape sides, each basically corresponding to one of the 4 sections of the book. That was probably an issue for anyone wanting to play the game without having read the novel. Even having read it, there's some terrible pieces of game design in it. For example, there's a moment in the Wormberg section where in order to escape you have to use the command Imagine Door to make a door appear, since in the Wormberg, believing in something can make it exist.
Imagine door. Rincewind imagined a door. The wall beside the wizard shimmered and was suddenly possessed of a door. Two-Flower frowned.
The trouble is, the game only explains this to you in a section later on, after you've had to already conjure up the door.
You imagined me, explained the dragon, seeing the confusion on the little man's face. Here at the Wormberg, where the barrier between fantasy and reality is thin, that is enough to cause me to be.
The game also has the usual flaws of the weaker text adventures, such as guess the verb issues.
Give milk to cat. This was not possible. Give cat milk. This was not possible. Drop milk. Rincewind dropped the saucer. Meow, smiled the cat.
Kill that bloody cat.
There's a section where you have to pick up Kring, the magic sword.
The wizard leaned against a tree, which then spoke to him. Psst, it said.
Psst, no. Just dazed, actually.
But using the standard Get Kring comes up with a ridiculous response.
Get Kring. That was nowhere to be seen.
You have to specifically
pull Kring. Rincewind pulled Kring out of the tree
to get the sword, even though the game just told me it wasn't here. There are some nice touches in the game to reflect the source material, such as replacing the compass directions with the ones from the Discworld, so instead of travelling north or east you have to go upwards or widdershins. But there are also moments where it departs from the style of the books completely, such as when Death appears and his dialogue has speech marks around it.
Disappointing.
In the end, The Colour of Magic was just another among the insanely huge number of adventure games that were flooding the market at the time, and like the majority of the rest of them, it just isn't very good. It's virtually impossible to imagine anyone actually playing it without ending up resorting to a walkthrough eventually. There are things that you have to do at certain points in the game, or it becomes unwinnable, and things you have to do with no real motivation, and it just doesn't really work. Pratchett was disappointed by the lack of promotion that The Colour of Magic was given, and there was no sequel made. It would be almost a decade before the Discworld returned to our monitors, but this time it would be in a far more graphical form.